Hello. Good afternoon. It's tea time. Welcome to Frankenstein Tea, a daily short story program for adult listeners. With me, I'm Kristen. I'm the library director for the Island Free Library on Block Island. This is an adult virtual program that we've been running for over a year. That time frame does coincide with the COVID-19 pandemic. We started it as a way to stay in touch with you, our listeners, our readers, our family, our friends, our patrons, and for you to stay in touch with us, your librarians and your local library, or maybe your not so local library. And so I read a short story 5 days a week, almost every day. For many months over the last year, I read every day. And was committed to that. And now I'm committed to reading until I get my second shot, which is sometime next month. I don't even know what that date is at this moment. I mean, it's scheduled, but I don't know when it is. And in my head, I don't know. And so I'm reading Tuesday through Saturday, work days, not on Sundays and Mondays. Those are my days off. And I don't have great internet at home, and I'm trying to, take a break from this place when I have my days off. So Tuesday through Saturday, 3 p.m. on this YouTube channel, I read a story, and I thank you for coming. So it's been a really fun project for me, this program. I try to read a variety of authors, a variety of genres, a variety of works in general. And I've been on a lot of exploration about short stories. I've read some very classic short stories. I've read different authors I'd never heard before, authors you have heard before, but I still hadn't heard. Maybe I've read authors you've never heard before, but I love, there's been this real mix and this journey of the short story without a particular form or outline, mission, right? My mission was only to diversify the readings. And so today I'm going to read Kurt Vonnegut, which I would say back in high school and maybe college, I'm not even really sure when I read Vonnegut, but he was a favorite. I loved him. I think I read them all. And again, I'm not sure of that time frame, but I'm going to say late 80s to, middle 80s. I graduated high school in 83. I graduated college in 87. Somewhere in there, middle 80s there, I read a lot of Kurt Vonnegut. There's my dad. Hi, Dad. And so I read one today. I was happy to find a short story today that was his. I don't think so. My father will correct me. But I don't think I've read Kurt Vonnegut for this program yet. So I'm excited to have a short story in my hands. And not that it's an exciting story. Excited, yeah. So I'm excited about the author. The story is it'll be interesting. Let's see what happens here. It's Vonnegut. So it's from this big fat book that I found in the book sale. It's big fat paperback, and it's called The Story and Its Writer: An Introduction to Short Fiction. Ann Charters, this is her book. This is the 5th edition. Ann Charters is from the University of Connecticut, Bedford St. Martin's Press. This copyright is 1999. And let's see, does it say when he wrote this? Let me see if I can. No, it just says what page it's on, but I bet you there, I've been through these books before. Then, all right, maybe here's some copyrights, acknowledgments. Let's see if I can find him. Zimmerman, Toby Weiswell, Tuvw, V. Vonnegut. Yeah, okay, so we can do it. So this story that I'm reading today was originally published in Welcome to the Monkey House by Kurt Vonnegut Jr., copyright 1961 by Delacorte Press. Okay, there's all the formalities. This is from Welcome to the Monkey House by Kurt Vonnegut Jr. This short story is titled Harrison Bergeron. So let's start again. So, I should know how to say his name. It's going to appear in the story. So am I going with Bergeron, hard G, or soft G? Bergeron. Bergeron. Let's try soft G. Bergeron. Let's see if I can get through the story with that. Harrison Bergeron. The year was 2081, and everybody was finally equal. They weren't only equal before God and the law, they were equal every which way. Nobody was smarter than anybody else. Nobody was better looking than anybody else. Nobody was stronger or quicker than anybody else. All this equality was due to the 211th, 212th, 213th Amendments to the Constitution, and to the unceasing vigilance of agents of the United States Handicapper General. Some things about living still weren't quite right, though. April, for instance, still drove people crazy by not being springtime. And it was in that clammy month that the HG men took George and Hazel Bergeron's 14-year-old son, Harrison, away. It was tragic, all right, but George and Hazel couldn't think about it very hard. Hazel had a perfectly average intelligence, which meant she couldn't think about anything except in short bursts. And George, while his intelligence was way above normal, had a little mental handicap radio in his ear. He was required by law to wear it at all times. It was tuned to a government transmitter. Every 20 seconds or so, the transmitter would send out some sharp noise to keep people like George from taking unfair advantage of their brains. George and Hazel were watching television. There were tears on Hazel's cheeks, but she'd forgotten for the moment what they were about. On the television screen were ballerinas. A buzzer sounded in George's head. His thoughts fled in panic, like bandits from a burglar alarm. That was a real pretty dance, that dance they just did, said Hazel. Huh? Said George. That dance. It was nice, said Hazel. Yup, said George. He tried to think a little about the ballerinas. They weren't really very good, no better than anybody else would have been anyway. They were burdened with sash weights and bags of birdshot, and their faces were masked so that no one, seeing a free and graceful gesture or a pretty face, would feel like something the cat drug in. George was toying with the vague notion that maybe dancers shouldn't be handicapped, but he didn't get very far with it before another noise in his ear radio scattered his thoughts. George winced. So did 2 out of the 8 ballerinas. Hazel saw him wince. Having no mental handicap herself, she had to ask George what the latest sound had been. Sounded like somebody hitting a milk bottle with a ball-peen hammer, said George. I'd think it would be real interesting hearing all the different sounds, said Hazel, a little envious. All the things they think up. Said George. Only if I was a handicapper general, you know what I would do? Said Hazel. Hazel, as a matter of fact, bore a strong resemblance to the handicapper general, a woman named Diana Moon Glampers. If I was Diana Moon Glampers, said Hazel, I'd have chimes on Sunday. Just chimes. Kind of in honor of religion. I could think if it was just chimes, said George. Well, maybe make 'em real loud, said Hazel. I think I'd make a good handicapper general. Good as anybody else, said George. Who knows better than I do what normal is, said Hazel. Right, said George. He began to think glimmeringly about his abnormal son, who was now in jail, about Harrison, but a 21-gun salute in his head stopped that. Boy, said Hazel, that was a doozy, wasn't it? It was such a doozy that George was white and trembling, and tears stood on the rims of his red eyes. 2 of the 8 ballerinas had collapsed to the studio floor, were holding their temples. All of a sudden, you look so tired, said Hazel. Why don't you stretch out on the sofa so's you can rest your handicap bag on the pillows, Honey Bunch? She was referring to the 47 pounds of birdshot in a canvas bag, which was padlocked around George's neck. Go on and rest the bag for a little while, she said. I don't care if you're not equal to me for a while. George weighed the bag with his hands. I don't mind it, he said. I don't notice it anymore. It's just a part of me. You've been so tired lately, kind of wore out, said Hazel. If there was just some way we could make a little hole in the bottom of the bag and just take out a few of them lead balls, just a few. 2 years in prison and $2,000 fine for every ball I took out, said George. I don't call that a bargain. If you could just take a few out when you came home from work, said Hazel. I mean, you don't compete with anybody around here. You just sit around. If I tried to get away with it, said George, then other people'd get away with it, and pretty soon we'd be right back to the dark ages again, with everybody competing against everybody else. You wouldn't like that, would you? I'd hate it, said Hazel. There you are, said George. The minute people start cheating on laws, what do you think happens to society? If Hazel hadn't been able to come up with an answer to this question, George couldn't have supplied one. A siren was going off in his head. Reckon it all fall apart, said Hazel. What would? Said George blankly. Society, said Hazel uncertainly. Wasn't that what you just said? Who knows, said George. The television program was suddenly interrupted for a news bulletin. It wasn't clear at first as to what the bulletin was about, since the announcer, like all announcers, had a serious speech impediment. For about half a minute, and in a state of high excitement, the announcer tried to say, "Ladies and gentlemen." He finally gave up, handed the bulletin to a ballerina to read. That's all right, Hazel said of the announcer. He tried. That's the big thing. He tried to do the best he could with what God gave him. He should get a nice raise for trying so hard. Ladies and gentlemen, said the ballerina, reading the bulletin. She must have been extraordinarily beautiful, because the mask she wore was hideous. And it was easy to see that she was the strongest and most graceful of all the dancers, for her handicap bags were as big as those worn by 200-pound men. And she had to apologize at once for her voice, which was a very unfair voice for a woman to use. Her voice was a warm, luminous, timeless melody. Excuse me, she said, and she began again, making her voice absolutely uncompetitive. Harrison Bergeron, age 14, she said in a grackle squawk, has just escaped from jail. where he was held on suspicion of plotting to overthrow the government. He is a genius and an athlete. He is under-handicapped and should be regarded as extremely dangerous. A police photograph of Harrison Bergeron was flashed on the screen upside down, then sideways, upside down again, then right side up. The picture showed the full length of Harrison against a background calibrated in feet and inches. He was exactly 7 feet tall. The rest of Harrison's appearance was Halloween and hardware. Nobody had ever borne heavier handicaps. He had outgrown hindrances faster than the HG men could think them up. Instead of a little ear radio for a mental handicap, he wore a tremendous pair of earphones and spectacles with thick, wavy lenses. The spectacles were intended to make him not only half blind, but to give him wanging headaches besides. Scrap metal was hung all over him. Ordinarily, there was a certain symmetry, a military neatness to the handicaps issued to strong people. But Harrison looked like a walking junkyard. In the race of life, Harrison carried 300 pounds. And to offset his good looks, the HG men required that he wear at all times a red rubber ball for a nose, keep his eyebrows shaved off, and cover his even white teeth with black caps at snaggletooth random. "If you see this boy," said the ballerina, "do not, I repeat, do not try to reason with him." There was the shriek of a door being torn from its hinges. Screams and barking cries of consternation came from the television set. The photograph of Harrison Bergeron on the screen jumped again and again, as though dancing to the tune of an earthquake. George Bergeron correctly identified the earthquake, and well, he might have, for many was the time his own home had danced to the same crashing tune. "My God," said George, "that must be Harrison." The realization was blasted from his mind instantly by the sound of an automobile collision in his head. When George could open his eyes again, the photograph of Harrison was gone. A living, breathing Harrison filled the screen. Clanking, clownish, and huge, Harrison stood in the center of the studio. The knob of the uprooted studio door was still in his hand. Ballerinas, technicians, musicians, and announcers cowered on their knees before him, expecting to die. "I am the emperor," cried Harrison. "Do you hear? I am the emperor. Everybody must do what I say at once." He stamped his foot, and the studio shook. "Even as I stand here," he bellowed, "crippled, hobbled, sickened, I am a greater ruler than any man who ever lived. Now watch me become what I can become." Harrison tore the straps of his handicap harness like wet tissue paper. Tore straps guaranteed to support 5,000 pounds. Harrison Bergeron by Kurt Vonnegut Jr. I think we read 1961 was Welcome to the Monkey House, but at the end of the story it says 1968. So let's just take a second to peek, just because we have a second. TUV Vonnegut. Yeah, it says Welcome to the Monkey House was 1961, and that's what it was from. Not sure about that. I had never read that story. And when I found it today, it's a tough one. There's some things to think about and talk about in that story. Yeah, that's right, Dad. Thanks, Kurt. But I had to do it, even though, well, anyway, it's different, right? It's variety, which is what I did the intro about. But I couldn't resist the April refusing to be spring-like. Is that what he says? Something like that. April, things had changed in the world, but April still refused to be spring-like. I couldn't resist that in the last few days of April here. I know my dad's had snow in Vermont through April. We've had some cold weather. I think mainland Rhode Island also got snow in April. I think we had hail yesterday. Was that yesterday that it hailed? I'm not sure. But I hope you have a great afternoon today. Let's keep moving forward. Have a great afternoon. Drink some tea. Enjoy the sunshine. Enjoy your knitting. If my friend Gail is out there, enjoy the knitting. And Dad, I'll talk to you soon. Okay, everybody. Thanks for coming. Thanks for listening. I'll see you tomorrow for another episode. Peace.